The last time you got sick, you probably did one of three things. You Googled your symptoms and convinced yourself you were dying. You took something from the medicine cabinet and went back to sleep. Or you booked an appointment and sat in a waiting room for 40 minutes under fluorescent lights reading a magazine from 2 years ago. Either way, help existed. A system existed. Somebody somewhere had already figured out what was wrong with you and exactly what to do about it. Now here is the question that should keep you up at night. What did people do before any of that existed? Not 100 years ago, not 500 years ago, 50,000 years ago. When your ancestor woke up one morning burning with fever, shaking, unable to hunt, unable to move, no doctor, no medicine, no hospital, no Google, no concept of bacteria, no concept of virus, no concept of infection, nothing, just a sick person lying in a cave or a camp, and everyone around them watching and not knowing why. Hi, I'm Marin Still, and what they did next is one of the strangest, most surprisingly effective, and occasionally absolutely terrifying stories in all of human history. Because here is what nobody tells you. Some of what they did worked, and some of what they did was so extreme that archaeologists are still finding the evidence in skulls thousands of years old. Literal holes in skulls, drilled by hand, while the person was alive. Stay with me. It gets weirder. Let's start with what ancient humans actually understood about sickness. The answer is almost nothing in the way we understand it today. Germ theory, the idea that invisible microscopic organisms invade the body and cause disease, was not proposed until the mid-1800s. Before that, for the entire span of human prehistory, people had no framework for why bodies failed. What they had instead was pattern recognition. They noticed that certain plants seemed to reduce fever, that certain behaviors seemed to help recovery, that rest, warmth, and water made sick people more likely to survive, and because they had no explanation for why sickness happened in the first place, they reached for the only explanatory framework available to them, the spiritual one. Sickness was not random. Sickness meant something. It meant a spirit was angry. It meant a taboo had been broken. It meant something invisible and intentional had entered the body and needed to be removed. The healer's job was not what we would recognize as medicine. It was negotiation, ritual, the management of forces that could not be seen. And here is where it gets genuinely fascinating, because that belief system, sickness as spiritual invasion, was not ignorant. It was a logical response to a world where cause and effect were invisible and pattern matching was the only tool available. The anthropologist Ralph Solecki, excavating Shanidar Cave in Iraq in the 1950s, found something that changed how researchers understood prehistoric healing. Among the Neanderthal, remains dated to roughly 60,000 years ago, he found pollen clusters near the bodies. Pollen from plants including ephedra, groundsel, and yarrow. These were not random plants. Yarrow has documented anti-inflammatory and wound-healing properties. Ephedra contains compounds that are still used in modern decongestants. Groundsel has been used across dozens of traditional medicine systems across the world. Solecki argued these were deliberate placements, that even 60,000 years ago, someone knew that certain plants did something useful to a sick body. This is the part that should reframe everything you think about prehistoric medicine. Because your ancestors were not stumbling blindly. They were running the oldest clinical trial in human history. The trial was just running on a very long timeline with no written records. Someone tried a plant. The sick person got better or did not. The information passed from person to person, generation to generation, inside the living memory of the group. Moorman's database of Native American medicinal plants, compiled by the ethnobotanist Daniel Moorman over decades, documents over 45,000 uses of approximately 3,000 plant species across North American indigenous traditions. When researchers cross-referenced these traditional uses with modern pharmacological analysis, a significant percentage showed genuine bioactive properties. The knowledge was real. The mechanism was unknown. The outcome was sometimes correct. But plants and ritual were only part of the picture. Because some ancient healers went much further than herbs. And this is the part that I genuinely could not believe when I first read about it. Trepanation, the practice of drilling, cutting, or scraping a hole in a living person's skull. This is not mythology. This is one of the most well-documented surgical procedures in all of human prehistory, found on every inhabited continent, dating back over 10,000 years. Skulls recovered from sites across Europe, South America, Africa, and Asia show evidence of deliberate, carefully executed circular holes cut into the cranium. And here is the detail that will not leave you alone once you learn it. A significant percentage of those skulls show evidence of bone regrowth around the hole, which means the patient survived, which means someone drilled a hole in their skull with a stone tool, and they lived. The neuroscientist John Verano at Tulane University has studied hundreds of trepanine skulls from pre-Columbian Peru and found survival rates that he describes as remarkable, given the conditions. Some individuals had undergone the procedure multiple times. The oldest confirmed case, a skull found in France, dated to approximately 7,000 years ago, shows clear evidence of healing and long-term survival post-procedure. Why did they do it? The most widely accepted explanation among researchers is spiritual and symptomatic. Severe headaches, seizures, mental illness, behavior that seemed possessed or controlled by something external. If sickness was spiritual invasion, then the logical intervention was to open a door, create an exit, let whatever had entered the body escape through the skull. The terrifying part is not that they believed this. The terrifying part is that in some cases, it may have accidentally worked. Trepanation can relieve pressure on the brain caused by traumatic injury. A person who had suffered a blow to the head, common in a life involving hunting, fighting, and falling, might have developed a subdural hematoma, a blood clot pressing on the brain. Drilling a hole would relieve that pressure. The healer believed they were releasing a spirit. What they were actually doing was emergency neurosurgery. 10,000 years ago, with stone tools, and it worked often enough that they kept doing it. But the most powerful medicine prehistoric humans had was not plants, and it was not surgery. It was something far simpler and far more difficult for modern researchers to quantify. It was each other. The evidence for this comes partly from the bones themselves. Researchers studying prehistoric skeletal remains have found consistent evidence of individuals who survived serious injuries and illnesses that should have been fatal without sustained care. A Neanderthal individual found at Shanidar, designated Shanidar 1 by Ralph Selecki, showed evidence of a withered arm, healed bone fractures, a crushed eye socket, and severe arthritis. This individual was estimated to be between 40 and 50 years old at death, which in Neanderthal terms was genuinely old. They could not have survived to that age without someone else feeding them, protecting them, and caring for them across years, not days, years. The paleoanthropologist Penny Spickens at the University of York has argued that compassionate care of the sick and injured is not a soft footnote in human prehistory. It is a core survival strategy. Groups that cared for their sick members retained experienced hunters, knowledgeable elders, and skilled toolmakers who would otherwise have died from injuries or illness in their 30s. Care was not charity, care was investment. And that care came wrapped in ritual. The dancing around the fire that we sometimes mock as primitive superstition was not nothing. It was the community, physically demonstrating to the sick person that they were not alone, that the group had not abandoned them, that their survival mattered. The psychological effect of that, of knowing you are not dying alone and forgotten, is not trivial. There is now substantial research showing that social connection, perceived support, and the belief that you are cared for measurably affect immune function, recovery time, and survival rates. The ancient healers did not know about cortisol and immune suppression, but they had noticed, across thousands of generations, that sick people who were surrounded by care survived more often than sick people who were alone. They were not wrong. They just did not know why they were right. So what does this mean for you, sitting here in the golden age of medicine, with antibiotics and antivirals and MRI machines and urgent care clinics on every corner? It means that the next time you get sick and someone brings you soup without being asked, or sits with you even when there is nothing useful they can do, or sends a message just to check in, that person is running a 50,000-year-old program. They are doing what the group has always done for the sick member. They are not doing nothing. They are doing the most ancient and most important thing. And your body knows it, even if your brain has forgotten. Hi, I'm Marin Still, and now you can never unknow this.